Pratt. We'll move to question time. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. On Tuesday night, when speaking at the AgriFutures Rural Women's Awards at Parliament House, the Prime Minister of Australia joked about a meal he had just shared with the Indonesian President-elect. He said this, don't make fun of it. When we had dinner, beautiful Australian beef, not the live export, we made sure it was dead. Minister, why did the Prime Minister joke about live exports when the live sheep export industry in Western Australia in particular is being shut down by your government, causing untold damage to farming families in my home state of Western Australia?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, I would first say that the Prime Minister and the government are very proud of Australia's beef industry and will often feature beef on the menu when we have visiting politicians, visiting leaders and ministers, because using those events to showcase great Australian produce is something I would have thought people would be pleased about.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order, senators. Order. We are 2 minutes into question time and I'm having to sit a minister down. I'm asking you to listen in silence. Please continue, Minister Wong.
Remind those opposite that it is this government which has worked very hard to ensure that beef markets which were closed to the industry were reopened. I would also note that exports of beef to Indonesia hit a record high in 2022-23. So I do find it interesting.
Minister Wong, order. I am asking senators on both sides to listen in respectful silence. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. And I do find it interesting that those opposite are not proud of the Prime Minister and others who make sure that they showcase Australian beef. We're proud of the beef industry. We're proud of the beef industry, and I'm disappointed that those opposite are not so proud of.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please resume your seat. Senator McGrath and Senator Cash. Listen in silence. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. As I said, when we came to government, we worked very hard with other countries, including China, to reopen beef markets. You know, we know, this is an important export industry for Australia, and it is surprising that there is not more bipartisanship around great Australian produce. Great Australian produce, and noting that, of course, that industry supports jobs and economic benefit into regional Australia, which I would have thought the National Party would have been supportive of.
Senator Watt. Senator Watt. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, does the Prime Minister think it's acceptable to make farming families he's putting out of business the butt of a joke at an awards ceremony for rural women?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, I have not called you. I'm waiting for silence. Minister Wong, please continue.
Thank you, President. Look, I understand that the live sheep exports phase-out has been a difficult issue for many families. I understand that Senator Cash and others seek to make as much politics out of this as possible. That's right. I understand. I think we all understand that. I understand also that we went to the election with a very clear commitment on this. Now, Senator Cash may not agree with it. She may wish to get outraged, but the reality is that was a commitment made at the election. We have legislated for that trade to end in May 2028. That enables certainty and the rollout of a transition support package. $107 million transition support package will provide opportunities for individuals, communities and businesses to be ready for the ending of that particular trade. Now, I appreciate this is a change. It is also consistent with the government's election.
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. I haven't called you yet, Senator Cash. I'm going to remind senators of Standing Order 203. I should not have to repeatedly call you, Senator Cash, you, Senator McGrath, and you, Senator McKenzie. I'm asking you to. I've asked and asked for respectful silence. I've called you individually, and you've completely ignored me. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. And today, the Labor Premier of Western Australia, Roger Cook, said the joke, and I quote, "rub salt into the wounds of WA farmers," and he has called on the Prime Minister to apologise. Will the Prime Minister apologise for this poor taste joke at the expense of Western Australian farmers?
Just a moment, Senator Wong. Senator McKenzie, if I have to call you again, I'm going to invoke 203. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator, I would make 3 points. First, that we do understand this is a big change for many farmers in Western Australia and the industry. Understand and it's not a funny. We understand that this is a big change and that this has been something that many people opposed. One of the things that we have done is put a very substantial amount of money on the table for transition. And I would make the final point that I've made earlier, that this was a very clear election commitment from the Albanese government.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
Thank you. And the point of order is in relation to relevance. The question was about, will the Prime Minister apologise for literally killing off an industry?
Senator Cash, thank you. The point of order, that's a debating point. The question also went to comments made by the WA Premier. I think that the minister— Order! I think the minister is being relevant, and I will continue to listen carefully. Minister.
Thank you. We also understand that Senator Cash and others are seeking to run a political campaign on this, and this question continues that.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
President, you just reflected on the fact that these were comments from the WA Premier, a Labor Premier, and for the minister to suggest that somehow we're playing politics with comments from somebody of her own side.
What is your point of order? There's no point of order. Please continue. Oh, you've finished. Thank you. Senator Darmanin? Senator.
Sorry. My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. Today, the Albanese Labor government delivered on its promise and introduced a bill to pay superannuation on paid parental leave, an issue very close to my heart. The government is removing yet another financial barrier for parents, predominantly mothers, who take time out of the workforce to care for their children. With the government scheme reaching 24 weeks next year as the super payment comes online, this scheme will make a real difference to parents in retirement. Minister, can you please explain why the government has taken the decision to provide super on paid parental leave and how it will benefit Australian families?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Gallagher.
President, and I thank Senator Darmanin for the question and congratulate her on her inaugural speech yesterday, which was a wonderful speech, and also how appropriate it is that your first question be on paying super on PPL, which is something that your union, the ASU, and your colleague and our colleague and friend Senator Linda White campaigned on for many years. And it's a very exciting day for us and all of those who've been involved in the decades-long campaign to have super paid on paid parental leave. It is a workplace entitlement, and it is the only workplace entitlement that remains without superannuation being paid on it President, and it took a Labor government to fix that, as it always does. It always falls to Labor governments to address unfairness, to make sure that women get a fair go, to make sure that we are driving women's equality through every aspect of life, including through the time that they spend bringing up and caring for young children. So I acknowledge all of those that have been involved in the campaign to date to do that. It really reminds us the importance of being in government and being able to implement these important reforms. With this change, eligible parents with babies born or adopted on or after the 1st of July 2025 will receive an additional 12% of their government-funded paid parental leave as a contribution to their superannuation fund. When the scheme reaches 26 weeks, as it will, another important Labor reform to expand PPL from 20 to 26 weeks, this will see around $3,000 flow into the parents' super accounts. Around 180,000 families across Australia will benefit every year, with extra dollars flowing into those superannuation accounts. President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Darman, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Paid parental leave is a Labor legacy that has benefited families across the country. Paying super on PPL enriches this legacy. We want to support shared care because every parent deserves the opportunity to spend time with their newborn. Our policy supports both mums and dads to take time off to care for their children. Can you please explain how Labor's paid parental leave reforms are supporting both parents?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Darmanin for the question. And again, she raises a very important point, which is about how do we encourage and improve the shared care when it comes to bringing up children, so that the responsibility doesn't just fall to one parent, traditionally and more often than not the mother. And so our reforms, again, the ones that we've introduced to expand PPL, have meant that we've introduced reserved leave so that each parent has leave that's just for them. And by 2026, this will be 4 weeks each. There's flexibility so that parents can share the remaining weeks however they want. Many of the men and second parents have told us that they want to be there in those early days after a baby is born. They want to set that pattern from the beginning of being a partner, not as an assistant to the child's mother. This is what modern families are asking for, and this is what our reforms have been able to achieve.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Darmanin, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. What other measures has the Albanese Labor government taken to boost economic security for Australian women and girls since coming to government? And how are the nation's women benefiting from having a government that puts women's economic security at the centre of its decision, supported by a record number of women at the Cabinet table?
Thank you, Senator Darmanin. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. And again, this government has made no secret of the fact that we have put driving gender equality and ensuring women's economic empowerment is strengthened in this country since our first days of government. So super on PPL is one of those reforms. Obviously, helping close the gender pay gap is another. The 15% pay rise for aged care workers and our announcement recently about early childhood educators. The fact that we've dealt with some of the problems in our IR system so that it doesn't disadvantage women or those industries where women are the predominant numbers in workers. Things like banning pay secrecy, encouraging enterprise bargaining. And of course, when we reshaped the tax cuts, we know from the analysis we did then that it made much better sense, not only from a fairness point of view to all taxpayers, but it also improved the amount that women taxpayers were getting through those tax cuts.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. And I ask, following the Albanese Labor government's job-destroying decision to block the $1 billion McPhillamys mine, Regis Resources yesterday wrote down the value of their project by $192 million, declaring it unfeasible. This company has been smashed, and over 800 jobs will now be ripped from that community, all because of this decision by your Labor government. How does this minister defend her job-destroying decision during a cost-of-living crisis?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. And I think this question was asked the day before yesterday, and was that yesterday? The days blur together. I'm sorry. And a number of points were made, I think, by Senator McAllister in response to this. The first is obviously that these decisions are made in accordance with the law by the Minister for the Environment. It is the case that the Minister did make a determination in relation not to the mine itself but to one of the locations for the tailings and waste dam, and obviously it's open to the company to consider an alternative site, and the advice I have is that more than 4 sites were investigated with a number of options in the mix. I would also make the point, Senator Duniam, back in 2021, the relevant minister then, which was the Deputy Liberal Leader, Minister Susan Lee, made a similar decision just down the road from the gold mine, and also considered the views of the same traditional owner group. And protected the site under Section 10 of the Protection Act. Now, I would just say here the interjections I think are not on point, Senator Duniam. The point is that there's a legal framework. There's a legal framework. There is a legal framework, and ministers have a responsibility to
order. Thank you, Minister. Order. Order across the chamber. Minister, please continue.
You make me laugh. You do. Yeah. It was you. I think Senator Watt might dispute that, actually. But anyway, we'll leave that for another. What I would say is that there is a statutory responsibility the person occupying the role of the minister has to exercise, and that's what Minister.
Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given the minister has defended her job-destroying decision on the basis of a submission from a small Indigenous group of only 18 people, I refer the minister to the comments of grazier Ross Wills, who's farmed on the land of the proposed tailings dam for the Regis Gold Mine for nearly 2 decades, who says he's never heard from this group. He's now considering whether he discontinues grazing on this land in light of this Section 10 decision, further damaging this community's fragile economy. I wonder, how does the minister justify this disastrous decision?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. My advice is, and I'm always happy to provide further information if I'm incorrect, is that this is the same traditional owner group that Minister Lee took account of when she made her decision. Well, Senator, your proposition is that this group ought not be listened to.
Order.
Would you?
Order.
Do you think you might just wait for at least half a sentence to finish before you keep interrupting? So rude. Like, seriously. I'm trying to give you a decent answer. No, you might not like it, but I am actually trying. Senator, your point seems to be it was okay for the minister in 2021 under a coalition government to listen to this group, but it's not okay now. Like, you either think they are reasonable, that is not how the law works, and that is not how the appropriate exercise of ministerial responsibility works. It isn't how it works.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. It's unbelievable that we can draw a link between a go-kart track and a gold mine, but I again refer to this Labor government's job-destroying decision to block this much-needed mine and the 800 jobs that go with it near Blaney in New South Wales. Local butcher Tanya Cassell and her husband chose to set up shop in Blaney 8 years ago in the hopes that this gold mine would boost their business once operational. What does the minister say to Ms Cassell, who said, and I quote, "I'm angry at what this government has done to our little town"? Does the minister now concede she was wrong?
Your time has expired. Minister Wong.
I again note that the minister has not blocked the mine, and that was not correct. You keep asserting that. It is false. I know that never get the facts get in the way of a good scare campaign if you're the coalition. We see that from Mr Dutton all the time. Never let the facts get in the way of a good scare campaign. The minister has not blocked the mine. She has applied legislation that came from your governments, past governments, and she has applied it in accordance with the law, as Ms Lee did when she was the minister.
Order.
You don't like the decision. You're entitled not to like the decision, but it was a decision made in accordance with the law, the same law that Ms Susan Lee, when she was a minister, applied, the same law that previous environment ministers has applied. As I said in my first answer, what the minister has said has made a finding in relation to the dam, the tailings dam, not the mine itself, and the falsehood should not continue to be peddled.
Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, President. My question is to Senator McAllister, representing the Minister for the Environment. Minister, fin whales are listed as vulnerable to extinction by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. What are your government's views on Japan's decision to add endangered fin whales to its commercial whaling program? And are you aware of disturbing reports that Japan has slaughtered its first fin whales in more than 50 years?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President. Well, Australia has been, as you know, a world leader in advocating for the protection and conservation of whales, and under this government we will continue to advocate for the protection and conservation of whales and the health of our ocean for future generations. Now, Minister Plibersek made a statement on the 1st of August indicating that we are deeply disappointed by Japan's decision to expand its commercial whaling program by adding fin whales. They are the second largest of all whales, and as you've indicated, they are considered vulnerable to extinction by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And I note that this decision expands Japan's commercial whaling program beyond the brides, the minke and sei whales that are already caught. We understand that Japan's whaling will continue to operate within its territorial waters and exclusive economic zone. We've made strong representations to the Japanese government, and I understand that an answer was recently tabled in response to a question you have asked Senator Whish-Wilson in estimates about this. But as at July 19 this year, the government had communicated on 8 occasions with Japan about its decision to add fin whales to its allowable catch list. The Foreign Minister and Australian officials have expressed disappointment at this proposal, and we've noted that we are opposed to all forms of commercial whaling. This has included multiple representations from Minister Wong and the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I can update you that in June, Australia led a united representation with our like-mindeds to express our serious concern about the Japanese government's proposal, and this included the EU, the UK, New Zealand and the United States. As I've already said, we are deeply disappointed by the decision.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Whish-Wilson, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for your very strong and clear response. As you point out, Australia has been a leader in the International Whaling Commission to stop whaling over many decades, including successfully prosecuting a case against Japan for illegal whaling in the International Court of Justice in 2014. Minister, will you now be pursuing this issue through the International Whaling Commission or seeking a new action through the International Court of Justice?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister McAllister.
Thank you very much, President. I understand that there will be a meeting of the International Whaling Commission in Peru in the coming months. Japan has withdrawn from the convention, and the matters raised are likely to occur within Japan's exclusive economic zone. Nonetheless, Australia will continue to play an active and vocal role in support of the whaling moratorium. We are continuing to build, in fact, on our strong record against whaling. We continue to invest in the work of the International Whaling Commission as the appropriate global body for the regulation of whaling and the conservation of cetaceans. Australia is Vice-Chair of the Commission for 23-24, which increased Australia's influence and leadership in the global protection and management of whales and dolphins, and we have committed $1.5 million in addition to our regular annual contribution to support the effective functioning of the IWC, bolster its conservation agenda and to support Australia's role as Vice-Chair.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson, second supplementary.
Thank you again, Minister. I'm sure all Australians support the very strong stance you're taking to protect whales. Minister, conservationist Paul Watson was arrested in Greenland by Danish authorities on his way to the North Pacific 2 weeks ago to protect endangered fin whales from the Japanese fleet. He is currently awaiting potential extradition to Japan for his previous activism to protect whales in Antarctica. Given Paul and his supporters gave us such a helping hand with stopping cruel whaling in the Southern Ocean, will your government now return the favour and advocate for Paul's release and freedom?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President. I am aware of reports of Captain Watson's arrest, and I understand that officials are engaging with the Captain Paul Watson Foundations. There are some limits on what I would say in this forum because this concerns legal proceedings involving a foreign national in another jurisdiction. But I do wish to observe that Australia's role generally and our work with international partners has been extremely important. We, of course, stopped whaling in 1979, and we have been a global advocate for cetacean conservation, and our leadership has directly contributed to a whaling-free Southern Ocean. It is promising that as a result of that leadership and through global action, we are seeing some whale populations recover. For example, humpback whales, which migrate through our waters, and other populations, unfortunately, like blue whales, have been slower to recover. This is an ongoing role, and Australia intends to play our part.
Has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator McAllister. How do the Albanese government's reforms to the National Disability Insurance Scheme that passed the Senate today not only help participants who rely on the scheme, but also ensure the scheme fulfils its true purpose of supporting those who need it and ensures its sustainability for future generations?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Smith for the question. The National Disability Insurance Scheme is changing lives for the better. And with today's legislation passing the Senate, the Albanese government is returning the scheme to its true purpose. That is, to get support through to the people for whom it is meant to support. Now, these reforms have been the subject of extensive debate in this place, and they represent a significant step towards a stronger NDIS. Not only do the reforms put participants back in the centre of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, they are getting much-needed support directly to participants. And as the Minister for the National Disability Scheme has said on many occasions, the scheme cannot be the only lifeboat in the ocean. This is part of a long-term reform plan to ensure that the investments that we are making in the National Disability Insurance Scheme are focused on outcomes, not inputs. And part of it does mean stopping the waste. And it's important to say that this is not simply rorts. Every dollar of waste is a dollar could be spent on a person with a disability. The Albanese government will do all of this in co-design with people with disability. We know that there are a range of views. These reforms have been subjected to an extensive consultation process, and we know that not everyone will disagree or agree on every point. But our intention is to work closely with the community, and the aim of our reforms are to be able to assure people on the NDIS that it's here for the future, that it is fair, equitable and transparent.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Can the Minister explain how the changes embedded in the Albanese Labor government's reforms to the National Disability Insurance Scheme that passed the Senate today will ensure that significant steps are made toward building a stronger National Disability Insurance Scheme in the best interests of those who are on the scheme?
Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President, and I thank the Senator for their supplementary question. As Minister Shorten said yesterday, the passing of this legislation is the construction of a scaffold which will allow the government to co-design the priority reforms recommended by the independent NDIS review. And the legislation does a few simple things. It stops the automatic top-up of participant plans that are exhausted early without change in circumstances. It creates the architecture to implement the NDIS review's recommendation to develop a total whole-of-person budget that is more flexible for all participants, and it allows for the exclusion of supports that are not consistent with the original intent of the NDIA and those that are supposed to be funded by other service systems. And this will provide the necessary legislative framework to improve the experience of participants and deliver decisions that are fair, transparent and consistent.
Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Can the Minister explain the consultation that was undertaken since the Albanese government came to government with people with a disability, their loved ones, carers, advocates and the disability sector to ensure that the reforms that passed the Senate today put people with disability at the centre of the scheme?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President, and I thank the senator for her supplementary question. The Albanese government will continue to listen to people with disability, their loved ones and those who represent them. This legislation is in fact the culmination of a huge body of consultation with the disability sector since Labor came to government in May 2022. The NDIS review talked to over 10,000 people and organisations. It took over 4,000 submissions and it listened for over 2,000 hours to the experiences, ideas and feedback of people with disability. There were NDIS town halls held around Australia with people with disability, NDIS providers, disability support workers and their unions, with over 10,000 attending in person and online. And the legislation also went through a 12-week Senate inquiry with more than 200 stakeholder submissions and 3 days of public hearings.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell.
President, my question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Early Childhood Education, Senator Watt. In Tasmania's northwest, there are 2 co-located family daycare centres. They provide care for 90 families in the region and have a healthy wait list for new families. Good business model that has the potential to expand, and it works. But they can't expand because, according to federal government rules, only 1 childcare centre is able to run per property title. This means the centres are at risk of being shut down. The State Education Minister says her hands are tied due to rules made in Canberra. Minister, is she right? And what do you have to say to Tasmanian families who may end up without childcare as a result of these rules?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Tyrrell, for the question. I will need to get some further information for you about the specific issue you've raised regarding the number of services per title, and I'm happy to come back with that information as soon as I can. But what I can certainly tell you is that not only is the Albanese government committed to providing much more accessible and affordable early childhood education services than we've seen in this country before, but ensuring those services are accessible and affordable in regional and rural Australia is a particular priority of our government. What we're trying to do is to make sure that regional services can open and stay open through a range of targeted funding measures. For example, we will shortly, through round 4 of the Community Childcare Fund, be providing around $80 million to over 430 early childhood education and care services that support disadvantaged and vulnerable communities, including in regional and rural areas. Happy to come back to you as well about whether what that will exactly provide for regional Tasmania. Of course, our broader cheaper childcare reforms are also making early learning cheaper for over 1 million families, including 265,000 families in regional Australia. And I'd be confident that within that number there's a pretty significant number in regional Tasmania as well. We have recognised that the former coalition government simply did not invest enough in early childhood education and care. It meant that too many families were unable to access the care that they needed and that their kids needed. And we all know the wider economic benefits of ensuring that families have access to early childhood education and care, quite apart from the benefits that kids get from that as well. So, as I say, if I've got any further information I can add about the specific issue that you've raised, I'll come back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Tasmanian State Government says it can't do anything to save these centres. Their hands are tied because the federal government doesn't recognise a multi-educator model for family daycare. Centres have already shut. Will the government relax the rules around multi-educator family daycare centres to enable these facilities to share costs while also providing high-quality care for local families?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Again, I will need to come back to you on the specific question that you've asked that you've said the Tasmanian minister has complained about. I would obviously want to make sure that the Tasmanian minister's views are accurate and that it's not an example of a state government trying to pass the buck to a federal government. I think we do know that from time to time that occurs. But as I say, in general, the Albanese government is doing everything possible to ensure that families in regional parts of our country, including in your state, do have access to the early childhood system that they need. I've indicated already some of the funding that is going to be flowing soon, and in fact, all up, we've provided about $614 million in funding through the Community Childcare Fund, which is designed to address barriers to participation in early childhood education and care in disadvantaged regional and rural communities. I've got no doubt there's a need for more in rural Tasmania, and we'll be doing everything we can to make that happen.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. These family daycare centres are providing an essential service to families in a regional area of Tassie. We should be championing these daycares, not trying to shut them down. If they close, families will be left in the lurch, forced to find care elsewhere or give up the jobs that keep the lights on and food on the table. Will the government consider Tasmania as a suitable place to test a pilot project for this model of childcare that could help provide a solution for families around the country?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell. Of course, it would be a matter for the Minister Ali, to determine what types of models that she is in a position to fund, but I'm sure she'll give your suggestions some consideration. I've been advised that Minister Ali's office have been working with you on these issues, so thank you for your constructive engagement on that. I'm told that actually Minister Ali hasn't heard anything from the Tasmanian minister about this issue, so maybe it would be a good idea for the Tasmanian minister and their office to pick up the phone if it is an issue of concern to them, and try to work constructively with Minister Ali's office in the way that you seem to be doing yourself.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Housing Minister, Senator Gallagher. In an extraordinary move, the Albanese government has today reneged on an agreement to refer the Housing Investment Probity Bill, a bill designed to protect taxpayer funds invested in the Housing Australia Future Fund from union corruption, to a Senate inquiry. The disgraced CFMEU has 3 members on the CBUS board, which has funnelled money back to the CFMEU, who have ultimately given more than $6 million to Labor. Minister, are the cosy ties between CBUS, the CFMEU and Labor the reason for the government opposing probity, transparency or safeguards to protect taxpayers and superannuation investors?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I think earlier this morning, and I thank Senator Bragg for the question, we sought to defer consideration of that, the referral of that bill. So, I mean, that is a matter that will remain before the Selection of Bills Committee. In relation to the Housing Australia Future Fund, I can advise the Senate that applications for that fund have been overwhelmingly positive. It is something that the housing sector more broadly is responding to and putting applications in. So, including, I think those opposite that voted against the HAF are pretty much the only people in Australia that think the HAF is a bad idea. We have many projects that are being considered through the appropriate processes now in terms of those applications. But in terms of the CFMEU, as you know, Senator Bragg, we have taken the strongest action possible to clean up the CFMEU. You've been part of that debate this week. We've passed the legislation to give the Minister power to put the construction division of the CFMEU under the control of an administrator, and we have made it clear that there is no place for criminality, corruption, thuggery, bullying or intimidation in any workplace in Australia, and that's why we brought legislation on to fix it. Senator Bragg would also know that there are requirements on superannuation funds to comply with strict governance standards and act in the best financial interests of members. But I'm sure Senator Bragg welcomes the fact that the HAF has been overly subscribed with loads of applications, hundreds of applications, which are seeking to build over 50,000 dwellings.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bragg's first supplementary.
Thank you very much. So there are allegations that the CBUS and the CFMEU are using CBUS property to strong-arm and delay projects across the country. For example, projects in Western Sydney have been delayed as members of the CBUS affiliate, the ETU, or Electrical Trades Union, refuse to turn up on-site to connect or disconnect from the grid. Why does the government defend unions and union-controlled super funds when they are crippling productivity in the construction sector?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I don't accept the question that the assertions that Senator Bragg has included in his question. I would say that I would trust APRA.
Senator Birmingham.
I would have more faith in APRA, the regulator, examining any concerns there may be about any particular superannuation group than Senator Bragg. So APRA have already announced the steps that they are taking. They are the regulator. They have the authority to ensure that superannuation funds, whether it be CBUS or others, are acting in the best financial interests of their members. We know that Senator Bragg has an ideological obsession and hatred, particularly of industry super funds, and so I think these matters would be best left to APRA to work through their processes.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Bragg's second supplementary.
Political. The government's protection racket doesn't just wreck Labor's integrity, it is also wrecking the construction sector and making this housing crisis so much worse. In just 2 weeks, Labor's new housing minister, Ms O'Neill, has accomplished the unthinkable. She has made Labor's credibility on housing even worse. Minister, how could the Australian people ever trust this government with a housing crisis?
Order. 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 I'm waiting for silence, particularly on my right. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, again, that question reflects most poorly on you, Senator Bragg. The Minister for Housing is an extraordinarily capable minister. She has hit the ground running in that portfolio, and I imagine that concerns Senator Bragg. She is out there examining how we can ensure that all of our policies are implemented, the $32 billion that we are putting in place, all of the measures that you have blocked in this place, that you have sought to delay, frustrate, and then you have the nerve to come in here and complain about housing. You didn't care about housing when you were in government. 10 years of ignoring housing. 10 years of ignoring it. We've come in 2 years done more to shift the dial in terms of Commonwealth involvement in housing than any government before us. We will continue to do that, and no doubt you will continue to block.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator McAllister, and is regarding the Sun Cable Industrial Solar Project in the Northern Territory. Minister, please advise the Senate of the total value of guarantees and, as a separate figure, the total value of subsidies available to the project.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Look, I am aware that the Minister for the Environment has recently provided approval for the Sun Cable project. This is a project, as I understand, Senator, that seeks to establish renewable generation capability in the Northern Territory and also significant transmission capability, which will allow that generation to be able to be exported for the use, as I understand it, within the Australian grid, but potentially also to our Singaporean neighbours. This is an extremely important project potentially. It's also one that is a first of kind in the Australian context.
Oh, sorry, Minister McAllister. Senator Roberts.
A point of order, President. Under Standing Order 72, Clause 3C, answers shall be directly relevant to each question. I asked about the total value of guarantees and the total value of subsidies. What are they? If you don't know, please just say so.
I will draw the minister to that part of your question, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. And the senator asks me to comment, I think, on policies that exist in the Australian context to support the rollout of reliable renewables. And, of course—
Minister McAllister, please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
I ask about the total value of guarantees and the total value of subsidies. That's it.
Minister Roberts. Sorry, Senator Roberts, the minister had barely said 7 words, so let's just hear the question. I have reminded the minister of the question and I will continue to listen carefully. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. And of course, the Australian government takes our advice about the future of the energy system from experts, and all of the advice that is provided to us is that the most cost-effective form of new generation and to replace the older, ageing assets that are shortly to retire is reliable renewables. And we take our advice from experts because we believe that Australians deserve the most cost-effective form of energy that is available to us. And we can't actually go back to doing things the way that they were done
Minister,
under the previous
please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
Mind the minister, I asked about the total value of guarantees and the total value of subsidies.
I have reminded the minister of the question and I will remind her again. Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks.
Order. Thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister, please continue.
Thanks, President. My advice is that this project has
the
been—
time for answering that question has expired. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The project proposes to generate electricity in the Northern Territory and send it to Singapore using a 4,300-kilometre-long cable, mostly undersea. This is 5 times longer than Norway's 760-kilometre Viking Link, the current longest cable. Viking loses 3.5% of its generation to transmission loss. Minister, what percentage of the project's Australian-generated electricity will be lost on transmission to Singapore?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, the senator asks about essentially the economics of the project that has been approved, and what I can advise the senator is that this is a matter for the project proponent. The government's role is not to assess the economics of this project. The minister has made a decision in relation to its environmental approvals. This is part of a broader transformation of the Australian economy. We are blessed with abundant sunshine, with abundant wind, with land, with skilful engineers, with skilful personnel and, frankly, with a mature commercial and legal environment and a national electricity system that many other countries seek to talk to us about because of its strengths. These are strengths for Australian communities. They are strengths for Australian regions, and they are potentially a source of significant economic opportunity for Australians living in regional communities.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The minister can't or won't tell me about guarantees and subsidies, nor a core project assumption. So, Minister, my supplementary question is, how much is Sun Cable lodging as a rehabilitation bond for the 12,400 hectares of land that will be covered in solar panels?
Thank you. I'm waiting for silence. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, the senator asks about the terms on which the approval for the Sun Cable project has been provided. And I can tell the senator that Minister Plibersek applies the terms of the Environment Protection, Conservation Biodiversity Act to all of the matters that come before her. This is a project proposal.
Just don't like Australian business.
This is a project proposal that intends to establish a significant source of new generation in the Northern Territory. As you've indicated in your first supplementary question.
Please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
Is there a rehabilitation bond in place to cover the desecration of the environment?
Senator Roberts, it's your responsibility to seek a point of order, not to re-ask your question. So if you have a point of order, I invite you to make it. If you don't, I'll ask the minister to continue. Thank you.
President, the point of order is one of relevance.
Thank you. I believe the minister is being relevant. She has outlined to you the approval processes, so I will ask her to continue. Order. Order. Senator Cash, which bit of order doesn't apply to you? Minister McAllister, please continue.
Thanks, President. Well, the minister's responsibility, of course, is to apply the law when a project is put before her. And since coming to government, we have sought to do so in relation to all of the projects before us, but we are pleased to see new renewable projects coming online. And since coming to government, we have given the green light to more than 55 of those under the National Environment.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Payman.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing Minister for Housing, Senator Gallagher. Minister, the great Australian dream of owning a home has turned into a nightmare, particularly for young Australians. Successive governments have introduced schemes aimed at making homes affordable, but these ill-conceived interventions often do more harm than good. The latest Help to Buy scheme is just another Band-Aid solution that will pour more money into an already overheated real estate market.
Order.
When will this government address the real villain of housing unaffordability, which is negative gearing, and make the necessary changes to our tax system to stop wealthy investors from hoarding our precious housing stock and making it easier for Australians to own a home?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you, President. I thank Senator Payman for the question, and I see that Senator Payman has changed her position on policies like Help to Buy from when she sat on this side of the chamber. We took, well, that is
order. Order.
It's the first I've heard. It's the first I've heard.
Order.
Because
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator Canavan, I've called order. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
Thank you. Because it was part of the suite of policies that we took to the election campaign, as you know, Senator Payman. And when we go to the election with a series of policies, we implement them in government, and that is what we are doing. But we are doing more than that. And whilst I acknowledge Senator Payman's speech, I think yesterday or earlier today, on negative gearing, we have no plans to change negative gearing arrangements, and I have to say that would not deliver one extra house right now, which is what needs to happen. What needs to happen is we need to build more houses. We need to increase the supply of housing, and that will allow more people to buy housing, which is why those opposite might think it's funny. They may think it's hilarious that people are struggling to buy housing, but we think it needs policies.
Please resume. Order on my left. Order. Minister, please continue.
We have set ourselves a target of 1.2 million homes by the end of the decade. We are backing that up with policies. We are backing that up with working with the states and territories on their planning reforms, on ensuring that they're getting rid of bottlenecks for approvals, through our Housing Australia Future Fund, through our social housing accelerator with new housing opening all the time. That is the focus that this government brings to housing. We will continue to implement our policies. We will continue to work with the states and territories, because we know that it's supply that we need to address to make sure that people can get into the housing market.
Answering has expired. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, I've heard from many constituents, including Claire from Perth, who's a single parent working part-time and raising her son, and she's told me that she feels there has been no progress in alleviating the housing crisis. Will this government at least act on this route by capping negative gearing to investment in new housing?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, as I said, and I refer to my previous answer, we have no plans to change negative gearing arrangements, but we have investing $32 billion into increasing the supply of housing in this country that those opposite think is so funny. It is important investments that the Commonwealth Government need to make into housing after a decade of complete and total utter failure of the former government to invest or show any interest at all in housing, particularly social housing, particularly housing for single parents like the ones that you raised, Senator Payman, because it's going to be through social and affordable housing and the increase in supply of social and affordable housing that we're able to help constituents like the one that you raise.
Just a moment, Senator Payman. Senator McGrath, your constant interjections are incredibly disorderly and disrespectful. I've called for silence numerous times. Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, another constituent, Victoria, who lives in the seat of Hasluck, reached out about how the current housing market is rigged against young people and working families. When will the government address the issue of foreign investors buying up large numbers of Australian homes, driving prices beyond the reach of everyday working families?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher. Order. Order.
Expect that question, Senator Payman, I have to say that. And it's a very similar question to the question that Senator Roberts, One Nation, asked me earlier in the week about foreign ownership of housing. And the evidence is very clear on that. It is a very, very small percentage of housing that is bought. Less than one, I think. I can't recall the number I gave Senator Roberts, but it was absolutely minuscule in terms of housings. There are also strict conditions on it about if you are to purchase housing that you need to live in it, for example. I'm much used to those sorts of questions coming to the government from One Nation. Foreign ownership and foreign investment in housing, well, it's true. On that issue, it is, because it's a very small part and it's often thrown out there as a cause of housing pressure for Australian people to buy into housing. It is simply not the case. We need to build more housing in this country, and that's what the government will do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, the Reserve Bank of Australia has confirmed that Australians are going to face interest rates that stay higher for longer. Meanwhile, markets are predicting a roughly 100 basis point easing of interest rates in the United States over the remainder of this year alone. Does the government expect Australians to benefit from a comparable rate cut by Christmas, or any rate cut by Christmas, or any alleviation in interest rate pressures by Christmas? And if not, why is Australia not only out of step with the United States, but with so many other comparable economies who are seeing interest rates already coming down?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and I thank the senator for his question, and it gives me the opportunity to remind him where inflation was when we came to government under him, how much higher it was under him. It also gives me the opportunity to remind him that Senator Gallagher and the Treasurer have turned Liberal deficits into Labor surpluses. I would remind him of these facts. It also gives me the opportunity to remind him. It also gives me the opportunity to remind him of the various cost of living measures that he and his colleagues voted against. It gives me the opportunity to remind him that they were going to go to an election because they so opposed the revamp of the Stage 3 tax cuts, because they didn't want all Australians get a tax cut. It gives me the opportunity to remind him that under the government of which he was a part, low wages were a deliberate design feature of the Australian economy. So I would say to the Leader of the Opposition, if you truly are interested in looking at Australians' cost of living, if you are truly interested in backing in support for Australians in the time of rising cost of living, you know what you could do? You could stop doing what Peter Dutton tells you to do. That's what you could do. You could actually behave, or Mr Dutton, you could stop doing what he tells you to do, because that bloke always wants to divide, always wants to oppose, even when it's in the national interest.
Just a moment, Senator Birmingham. Senator O'Sullivan, I am tired of calling you to order, and I'm tired of calling you to order Senator Hume. I've asked you a number of times to listen in respectful silence. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Supplementary question. Media reports of today revealed that the consumption of chicken, the cheapest and most popular protein for Australians, has dropped for the first time in decades under the Albanese government. Just how bad is it going to get for Australians under the Albanese Labor government as interest rates stay higher for longer, inflation remains persistent and Australian families are now cutting back on even the most basics of food?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. The time for answering has expired. Minister Wong.
I would again remind the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate that inflation is less than half its peak, and certainly much lower than we inherited from him and other members of the government. Now,
Senator Canavan.
Those of us on this side understand acutely that Australians are doing it tough. We know the pressures that Australians are under, and of course, inflation is still higher than we would like, and it is proving to be much stickier than we would like. We all understand that, which is why so much of the work that we have been doing has been focused on how it is we go about trying to alleviate some of that cost of living pressure where we can without adding to inflation. And I, for one, find it really interesting that the opposition come in here and say to us, oh, it's really bad, this cost of living issue. What are you doing about it? It's really bad, this inflation issue.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. The Reserve Bank has described the very policies, Minister, that you're citing as being, by their nature, time-limited and temporary, as being one-off and that are going to be reversed. Minister, aren't your policies that you pretend are out to help Australians just band-aids to get the Albanese Labor government through an election and to cover up any sense of the Labor government having any type of real policy to tackle persistent inflation and interest rates staying higher for longer?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. The time has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, so the logic of Senator Birmingham's question is that we didn't like it and voted against it in the first place, but now we're having a go at you because it's not ongoing. That's the logic. We didn't vote for it the first time, but now we're going to have a go at you because it ends. You didn't want it in the first place. I mean, this shows the hypocrisy of the opposition who come in here and seek to play a bit of politics with cost of living but don't do anything other than oppose measures that this government seeks to put in place to assist Australians and their families with cost of living. You have no credibility on this issue, and Australians know